guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Lisa. I am the knitting artist, and as the name implies, I am an artist who knits. But that's really just the half of it. Honestly, I do so much. But the reason you're probably here and the reason I'm making this video is because I'm going to talk to you guys about color inspiration and my paintings and my yarns, and I'm going to show some off, and hopefully you're going to fall in love with them and have to have them, right? Yeah. But I mean, this is really just a chance for me to discuss who I am with you, and I really enjoy that I'm able to do that. So today I'm going to show you guys another one of my colorways from my yarn line, and this colorway is Fallen Moon Drops. So you guys can mostly see that there. I'll pull up a skein. Fallen Moon Drops is probably, at least in my mind, my most popular colorway. It's also one of my absolute favorites, and it was one of my very earliest ones that I came up with. So, yeah, it was a colorway that when I first started dyeing, I knew I needed to make this painting into this yarn. So, this colorway has lots and lots of pops of blue. I'm pointing at the wrong side. Okay, as you guys can see, there are pops of purple and blue and pink and some yellow, and it's supposed to be a dark navy, but for some reason the navy dye in different batches does not always come out super dark. So it's supposed to be closer to that, but sometimes I get a paler, less defined navy, but it's still so pretty that I don't mind. And hopefully you guys don't either. And hopefully when you're buying yarn, you buy enough skeins for your project at once that you're able to match. And I will say that, you know, every time I dye, that whole batch that I dyed matches, but sometimes this navy blue just doesn't come out exactly the way I want it to. So, what's the story on the yarn? Well, the story on the yarn, this is inspired by a painting I did when I was an artist in residence at the Horlock House in Navasota, which was from the fall of 2014 to the end of the summer of 2015, essentially. I was there for a whole year. I thought I was only going to be there for 6 months, and then they extended it to a whole year because they liked me and I had nowhere else to go. Yeah, but anyway, this was one of the first paintings I did when I was at that residency. I had a couple others that I did that I finished, that I started before I came to the residency, but this was I think this was the first one I did from start to finish at the residency. And I'm putting it up on the screen so you guys can see. But my initial inspiration was lily pads. If I'm remembering correctly, I had been looking through some Disney concept art books, and it was either Princess and the Frog or Robin Hood, I think. There was some lily pads. I had seen a concept art sketch drawing of water with lily pads in it. And I remember thinking that would be really interesting because I haven't tried that before, which was looking down, which I had tried before but didn't go well, looking down but more water and less of an actual landscape. So I created a setup in my studio of, I think I did a piece of cardboard I set everything out on. And if you guys remember from my previous discussions, I do work from all white setups with colored lights. And setups include fabrics and knitted forms, obviously, and things like, and ropes and yarns and things like that. So for this one specifically, I actually used plastic wrap. So I remember building up some little hills underneath with bits of fabric and bits of white paper, and then putting plastic wrap over it, and then putting the different yarn forms in different places. I think I actually glued them down because at the time I was trying to make a more permanent still life, which never turned into anything. But so I made a all white, water-ish landscape out of plastic wrap, knitted forms, etc. If I can find a photo, I'll put it up. If you don't see a photo right now, that means I did not find a photo. I don't remember if I took one or not. I have to look in a couple places. But anyway, so I did this painting, And I decided I wanted it to be watery, and the best way I could interpret water was obviously with blues. So I did blues, and I think I put a piece of like neon pink poster board on one side to reflect when the light hit, and that's where the pinks came from. The yellow probably came a little bit from there too, and it probably also came from the natural light and or me just deciding it needed pops of yellow. So this whole landscape to date is still one of my favorite paintings, and it eventually informed my current art style, which is the tide pools that I've been painting. I call them tide pools. Those are my newest paintings. This painting was done in 2014, but I came back to the concept of it in like 2017, and I have been doing that concept ever since. So I like to think that this painting informed what I'm doing now. Originally, when I was doing this painting, I was planning to display it in a group art show called Serenity, which was put on by a group called the Guerrilla Art Takeover. They no longer exist, but they were fantastic. I loved them to death. Their names are Nancy and Jeremy. Anyway, they put on like group shows all over town, and they had a themed show called Serenity, and I thought, painting this waterscape painting would just be awesome. It's so serene, so floating, so awesome. I already said awesome. Anyway, so I put this painting in that show. I hope to sell it, but of course, I didn't. Art market's hard. But I'm putting a picture up here of the painting in that show. I even dressed to match the painting that day. It's kind of funny. But this painting also ended up finding itself into a fiber art show at the Arts Council that hosted our residency because they thought it would be appropriate. And then it ended up at one of our open houses where a very good friend of mine purchased it and has owned it ever since, and I love her to death. In fact, when I started dyeing yarn, she lent me the painting bag so I could get my colors right. So, yeah, that's kind of the story of this painting. Like I said at the beginning, when I first started dyeing yarn, I knew I wanted this painting to become one of my first colorways because the colors were so bright, so vibrant, and these colors tended to kind of be on trend. I know I like blues and purples a lot, and I really hope that other people would. I feel like I've sold a lot of this color. I consider it my most popular, but maybe that's just because it's my favorite. But I was going to say something else and I completely lost it. Yeah. Oh, this colorway has developed a lot. So when I first started dyeing professionally, I was using Kool-Aid because I didn't know how dangerous acid dyes were or trust myself with them. So the colorway that I developed with the Kool-Aid, which I'm putting a picture of on screen, had a lot more pink, and I thought before I was able to borrow the painting from my friend that this painting was more turquoise. So the blues that were in it were closer to a greenish blue and not like a sky blue. So those were some of the early skeins I developed. I even designed the pattern that I'll show you later called Fallen Moon Drops with one of those skeins. Unfortunately, when I washed it, some of the blue disappeared and it became very, very pink. And that painting, if you've seen the photo I had up, is not that pink. So I knew I needed to go back to the chopping block and figure things out. And luckily, when I made the switch to acid dyes, I was able to kind of change up my formula and really figure out which colors I wanted where and how deep I wanted my blues to be. And that is when I developed the versions that you guys see today, which is the much more bright neon, but with pops of navy and pops of dark. So yeah, that's the story. I'm gonna take y'all over to my table and I'm gonna show you guys the yarn laid out and how I planned out the colors. And then I'll come back and I'll talk to you guys about my different bases and some pattern ideas that I have for you. I'll see you in a bit. I got a picture. Okay. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about my color choices and how I chose to place them for this painting. So as you guys have kind of heard and seen on the screen, this is a very blue, purple with some pops of pink and yellow painting. It's not a super complex one. Some of my newer colorways are a lot more complex, but this is a fun one to dye. So if you look at this snake that I have, which is how I diagram out how I'm going to dye my yarn, you can kind of get an idea of where my different colors go. Now, when I'm dyeing this one, I always kind of start in the top corner as like the top of my painting. So I'm putting a picture on the screen for the record. This area right here is the very top right corner, which is dark, and like I said before, this blue comes out differently every time. So dark blue with bits of light blue kind of surrounding it as reflections, and then we're moving down into that knitted form that looks like a jellyfish, that's got a lot of pinks and yellows in it, directly followed by the dark shadow that's underneath it. And then when we get down to the bottom corner, we have light blues and again more dark shadows. But then after we get past that corner area in the bottom, we start to venture into that big huge knitted form in the bottom left corner that has lots of purple with little pops of pinks and yellows in it. And then the water that's next to it is more purple than the water that was before. So you get the purple with the blue highlights, we get back into the darks, and then this is my favorite part of this whole yarn, and it is that top form that is hiding underneath all the water in the shadows. That I represent by doing the dark blue, and then I do the pinks and the yellows and the purples, and I actually squirt and kind of scribble them all together, so that way they kind of become a Mod Podge of color in this area, because that's essentially what's happening in the painting. It's a very like messy, crazy mixture of colors that I just feel is really cool to play around with and do different things with in this area. So that's the skein of yarn, and how I map it out. I'm gonna put on a, what's it called? A time-lapse video of me dyeing up a skein of this, and then we'll go back and we'll talk about the different bases. So we'll see you in a sec. Okay, we're back. I hope y'all enjoyed seeing the video of me dyeing, as well as seeing like how I map out my colors. I'm going to talk to you guys just a little bit more about this yarn specifically and some ideas for things that you can make with it. So my go-to base is my light fingering. It is a 2-ply superwash merino fingering weight yarn, or a little bit lighter than fingering, but it's luscious. It's squishy and it takes the dye really well. I'm sorry if the light is bad. It's got a window back there that's shining really bright. Anyway, so this is the light base, and this is my go-to default base. This is the base I've been dyeing on since I started. And if you've seen some other videos, I've talked about my speckle style, which I also call paint water. This one's like exploding. I'm gonna have to rewind it. But it's got the pops of white that show through in pretty much everywhere, and so it's great if you are trying to do some kind of like fade, if you want to do both of these, or if you want to fade a bunch of my different colorways with the speckles together. That is awesome. I've developed a couple of different tonals for this yarn as well. This purple, which I titled Misty Violet, although it is very neon, is the purple that I do for this, and I think I really just dye the purple in the light base because I have so many other purples that I don't always pick them all out when I'm trying to decide which bases to use for what. Anyway, so this is called Misty Violet, and then I have a blue that I've developed to match that I call Ocean Blue. Kind of like when I was talking about those navies before, on every single base I have, this blue turns out differently. So this is like a really, really deep blue on my DK base, but on my light base right now, it's actually closer to this like turquoisey blue. And on my worsted base, it's pretty close to that DK. So I'm working on it. I'm trying to get consistent. I'm going to be retooling my recipe the next time I dye up these blues. But for now, if you're going to buy the blue, check my website, because all of the colors on the website are accurate to the photos on the website, are accurate to what the color currently looks like. But anyway, what I was trying to say is this is a fantastic pair. Okay, all three of these together. And all three of these together were actually my inspiration for this hat. So this is called my dripping paint hat, and it is the speckle paint water style, then the classic variegated, and then the tonal. Or you could reverse it if you really wanted to. And in between is a very, very simple slip stitch pattern. You don't need to do any actual stranded color work knitting. It's all slip stitch. That lets you fade between all three colors. And I did the hat, and then I had so much, actually I did the cowl first. I made a cowl, and then I had leftovers, so I made a hat. The cowl, this version of the cowl is a small version because I like just little neck pieces, but I also have a larger version. The pattern has the math for both. I don't know where my larger version is right now. But, so if you're curious about like what all three of these yarns look like together, there's your answer. I have kits for this pattern with all my different yarn colorways on my website. I'm running kind of low on certain colorways. In fact, I think I just sold the last one for this. But if you really wanted yarn for this, just let me know, because the combination of the two only takes 50 grams of each. So you're welcome to buy a full skein of each. I would love if you bought a full skein of each, but I was trying to save people some money and some energy when I made those kits, so I did 3 50-gram skeins to make the hat and the cowl. I also I pretty much dye this colorway on every base because, like I said, it's my favorite and my most popular. So I have it on the Silky Singles, which is the 70/30 merino silk single ply yarn. I love the sheen on this, but if you look, the pink pretty much always comes out the same because that neon pink is just amazing. But the blues are definitely more pastel because the silk takes the yarn differently. And it's just squishy, it's luscious. I wouldn't recommend it for sweaters, but it makes great neck pieces, even hats maybe. I've done a couple cowls in this base and I love it. So this is a Silky Single. And then putting that next to the sock, you can see they're also very similar. The sock is also pretty pastel. The sock is a 75/25 merino nylon. It's 4 ply, so it's a little bit stiffer. And it is great for socks. In fact, I'm wearing a pair of socks in this yarn right now. They wash up great. They're just great. So that is my sock base, for those of you who are curious. Again, it is more pastel, but it has nice strength and stability to it. I dyed this one on my worsted. And my worsted I don't have a lot of because it doesn't sell too well, at least this time of the year. But the worsted seems to take the dye the brightest. So on my worsted yarn, you're going to get that super, super bright neon pink, that super bright neon blue, the beautiful golden yellow, and even those dark navies actually turn out really nice. And then going off of that, the DK is actually pretty close to the worsted in that it also takes those neons really well. This one's a little bit more pastel-y, but it's still, they're still that same family. And the DK I am dyeing in both the speckle style and the solid style. And I do have, again, the ocean blue in the DK. I really want to dye this purple in it. That'll be next. But right now I just have the blue. So set of 3, shawl, sweater, whatever you're feeling like, that would be awesome. I'm going to show you guys a couple more patterns. So this is a pattern I developed when I first was trying to market my yarns, because I also do write patterns, and I call this is the Fallen Moon Drops Shawl. Showl, actually. It is a cowl that has a shawl edging on it, so it looks like a shawl, but you don't have to deal with the corners tucking them in. It has eyelets and these big waves with holes at the bottom. When I was developing this, I was trying to emulate the painting, and I just thought using the feather and fan pattern along with some simple cast-offs and bind-offs and cast-ons to make these holes would just be really, really pretty. I've seen other people on Ravelry make it with other variegated yarns, and it's gorgeous as well. I did put beads on this version, but the pattern does not have beads written into it. I just thought beads would be awesome. This is actually the second one I made. The first one was with that really pink skein that I mentioned before, and I'll put a picture up, but it's like super pink. I don't even display that one anymore. But this one's a good version. It's very purpley and blue. It's a good representation of what the colorway usually looks like. And then I also have this. This is a shawl, and it's very, very similar to the Hitchhiker in that it has those points on the end. But it is actually called Elevations by Sharon Lex. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. This was knitted by one of my friends as a sample for my shop. It was with my light base, but if you can see in the terrible lighting of my studio, this version at the time was a little bit darker. So again, it was just kind of inexperience on my part. At this point in time, this colorway is very, very consistently close to this, more so than the cowl that I just held up. So it's consistently close to what's in this hat, which is, you know, very, very bright with dark blues and yellows. So yeah, this yarn is great for anything variegated. I mean, all my yarns are great for anything variegated. It fades well, especially into other blues and purples, and it knits up beautifully. So if you ever have any questions, or you want to know about what yarn, or you want more photos, or you just need to talk yarn, or you need to buy something, just let me know. Visit my website, thenittingartist.com, or I'm on Facebook and Instagram as The Knitting Artist. And we'll see you next time.